When the first signs appeared, nobody on Earth understood what they were looking at. It started as small distortions far away in the night sky, something the observatories and space telescopes recorded but could not explain. The stars near the edge of the solar system seemed to bend, as if a ripple was moving across the fabric of space itself. At first, scientists thought it was an equipment malfunction, or perhaps a natural event they had not yet studied. But as the weeks went on, the ripples became stronger, clearer, and more deliberate. Something was coming. Governments tried to keep the news quiet, fearing panic. Astronomers were told to stay silent, data was locked away, and military satellites began watching the outer planets with nervous precision. Yet rumors always find their way through cracks. Amateur sky watchers noticed strange readings in their instruments. Online forums lit up with speculation about wormholes, secret weapons, or even alien ships. The truth was stranger than all of it. Humanity was being watched by a presence far older and far stronger than anything Earth had ever faced. On Earth, life seemed normal. People went to work, children went to school, cities buzzed with their usual noise. But behind closed doors, world leaders sat in emergency meetings, struggling to make decisions that could change the future of the species. Messages from deep space had been intercepted, not in human language but in mathematical codes too perfect to be natural. They carried warnings, demands, even. Whoever was out there knew of humanity, and they were on their way. For centuries, humans had looked up at the stars and asked if they were alone. Now they had their answer, and it was not the friendly dream of explorers shaking hands across the galaxy. It was the cold reality of conquest. The newcomers did not come in peace, nor in curiosity. Their first transmissions, once decoded, made their intentions clear. Earth was a resource, not a partner. Humanity was not seen as an equal species but as a young race to be bent, harvested, or erased if necessary. The United Nations tried to respond. Words of diplomacy were sent back through radio bursts, carefully written to show both humility and strength. But no reply came. Instead, the ripples grew stronger. Fleets of massive ships, dark and silent, appeared on the edge of the solar system. They hovered near the orbit of Neptune, their silhouettes blocking the distant light of the stars. For the first time in history, humans saw alien vessels with their own eyes through telescopes, and the sight chilled every soul who looked at them. These ships were not delicate or elegant. They were brutal in design, like weapons shaped into cities. Each one was larger than any structure built on Earth, dwarfing even the grandest of human space stations. They did not move fast. They moved with certainty, as if they had all the time in the universe. That was what made them terrifying. Predators do not rush when they know their prey cannot escape. News eventually leaked. Despite the best efforts of governments, images and recordings spread online. People argued fiercely. Some thought it was fake, a trick created with computer effects. Others believed it was the end of days. Religious leaders called it prophecy fulfilled. Scientists warned that humanity might be on the edge of extinction. Fear spread, but so did a strange unity. For once, every nation looked up at the same sky and saw the same threat. Military forces across the world went on high alert. Submarines shifted silently beneath oceans, aircraft patrolled borders, and secret facilities came alive with engineers and soldiers. Humanity had no clear plan, but instinct demanded preparation. Old rivalries suddenly seemed meaningless compared to the enormity of what was approaching. It was no longer about nations, flags, or politics. It was about survival. Amid all this tension, there were moments of quiet awe. Some people stood on rooftops at night, gazing at the stars, whispering to themselves that they were not alone. For dreamers and poets, this was confirmation of everything they had hoped for. But the dream carried a shadow. The arrival of the unknown was not a friendly hand reaching across the cosmos. It was a clenched fist. On Mars, rovers captured faint images of strange lights near the horizon of space. On the Moon, abandoned instruments picked up energy readings far beyond natural limits. In orbit, astronauts looked down at Earth, wondering if they would ever return home again. Every sign, every reading, Every silent movement of those colossal ships reminded humanity of its smallness. And yet, in that smallness, there was also something powerful. Humanity had survived countless disasters of its own making: wars, plagues, starvation, and hatred. Time and again, it had stumbled but risen again. The alien presence was vast, but the human spirit was stubborn. In the darkest hours, whispers began to spread in underground circles of scientists and military strategists. Earth was not entirely unprepared. There were projects hidden from the public eye, experiments in weapons and ships that most of the world did not know about. The day of first contact was not marked by greetings or peace talks. It was marked by silence. The alien fleet sat beyond Jupiter, unmoving, as if watching and waiting. Humanity held its breath. Every person, from the highest leader to the youngest child, felt the same question clawing inside their mind. What will they do to us? The unknown had arrived, and it was not something that could be ignored anymore. Humanity stood at the edge of history, caught between fear and defiance, staring into the abyss of the stars. And for the first time, the stars stared back. The first clear message from the aliens was received when their fleet had barely entered the outer solar system. It was not spoken in words but carried in a precise mathematical code. At first, Earth's brightest minds struggled to break it apart, but once the logic became clear, the meaning was undeniable. It was a warning and a demand. The aliens declared themselves the rightful rulers of this region of space. Humanity was ordered to submit, to offer tribute, and to surrender control of its planets and resources. If they obeyed, they would be allowed to survive as a servant race. If they resisted, they would be erased. The message struck like thunder behind closed doors. Leaders of every major nation gathered in urgent meetings, often connected by secret communication lines that cut across borders and old rivalries. No one spoke openly to the public yet. They feared chaos, mass panic, riots, or collapse of social order. Instead, they argued in hidden rooms, trying to decide if humanity should kneel or stand. Some argued surrender was the only choice. How could Earth, with its fragile ships and young technology, possibly resist a fleet that had traveled across the stars? These aliens clearly possessed weapons of unimaginable power, engines that could bend space, shields that could withstand meteors. If humanity chose to fight, the cost would be extinction. Better to live as servants than to die as ashes. Others refused to bend. Humanity had fought too hard through its own history to give in without a struggle. Surrender meant chains that could last forever. Resistance, no matter how hopeless, at least meant dignity. It meant fighting for children, for home, for the future of a species. These voices were fewer at first, but they carried a fire that could not be ignored. The United Nations, struggling to appear strong, drafted a careful reply. It spoke of peace, of coexistence, of cooperation. It offered trade, cultural exchange, and mutual respect. It was written with the hope that the aliens might be reasonable. That maybe they were not conquerors but explorers testing the will of humanity. The message was sent across the stars by every frequency Earth could muster. The reply never came. Days passed. Weeks. The alien fleet stayed silent, but their movements told a louder story. The ships drifted closer to the inner solar system, step by step, orbit by orbit. They ignored Earth's words completely, as if diplomacy was beneath them. The silence was more terrifying than any open threat. It was the silence of a predator watching prey, knowing the outcome before the hunt even began. At last, the alien code returned with one final transmission. It was short, sharp, and merciless. The offer of survival was gone. Humanity's refusal to submit had been noted. The fleet was coming, and resistance would be crushed. It was less a warning than a sentence. When this message reached the governments of Earth, the debate became even fiercer. Some still begged for negotiation, desperate to find a crack in the wall. Others shouted that negotiation was meaningless. The aliens had already chosen war. Behind the arguments, the truth grew clearer with every passing hour. The galaxy did not see humanity as an equal. They saw it as a mistake to be corrected, or a resource to be consumed. And yet, in the chaos of human politics, something unusual happened. Nations that had once distrusted each other began to share information. For the first time in history, secret military technologies crossed borders, old enemies spoke as allies, and plans for defense became global instead of national. Fear had united humanity, at least for a moment. The warnings of the aliens had not broken their will. Instead, they had planted the seeds of defiance. Still, the people of Earth were not told the full truth. Governments carefully crafted statements about unusual cosmic phenomena and satellite irregularities. Scientists were pressured to remain silent, their discoveries buried under orders of secrecy. But rumors are stronger than silence. Across the world, whispers grew. Why were governments acting strangely? Why were militaries mobilizing at levels unseen since the last great wars? Why did so many satellites suddenly go dark? In online spaces, speculation turned into belief. People guessed the truth long before it was officially admitted. Some welcomed it, convinced that advanced beings would bring miracles. Others trembled in fear, imagining the sky torn apart by fire. But while ordinary people lived in uncertainty, far away in secret hangars and orbital stations, the work of preparation continued. Humanity's greatest minds were not only afraid, they were determined. For years, hidden programs had studied advanced theories of energy and propulsion. Experimental weapons had been tested in deserts and deep oceans. And there was one project so secret, so ambitious, that only a handful of leaders even knew it existed. A project that would one day carry the name Thunder-Soul. The warnings of the aliens should have crushed hope. But instead, they ignited a stubborn refusal that was deeply human. Humanity had always been told what it could not do. Survive famine, survive plague, survive endless war, and yet it had endured. Now, the galaxy itself was telling humanity it could not survive. And in the hearts of men and women everywhere, a single thought began to rise. Watch us try. The aliens thought their demands had sealed Earth's fate. But what they did not understand was that warnings, when ignored by humanity, often become sparks. Sparks that light fires. And this fire was only just beginning to burn. Long before the alien fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system, some humans already suspected that one day they might not be alone. While most of the world focused on wars, politics, and survival, a small group of scientists, engineers, and military leaders had been preparing in secret. They worked in hidden facilities buried deep under mountains, inside desert bunkers, and even in quiet orbital stations that were disguised as research labs. Their dream was not simply to build a better spaceship. Their dream was to build something that could stand against the unknown. Something powerful enough to defend humanity against whatever came from the stars. This project had many names over the years. To some, it was called Project Dawn. To others, it was the Sentinel. But when it was finally completed, its true name was spoken with awe: Thunder-Soul. The Thunder-Soul was unlike anything humanity had ever built. Most human ships were fragile compared to the alien vessels that had been seen, small steel tubes pushed forward by chemical rockets or, at best, nuclear drives. But Thunder-Soul was alive in a different way. Its heart was an experimental energy core that pulsed like a living star, created from the fusion of human science and theories once thought impossible. This core gave the ship not only incredible power but also a strange hum, a vibration that made those who walked near it feel as if they were standing beside a storm waiting to break. That is why the ship was named Thunder-Soul. It had the soul of a storm trapped inside metal. The construction of this battleship had been one of the greatest secrets in human history. Workers were told only small pieces of the truth. Some believed they were building a new generation of space exploration vessels. Others thought it was a massive orbital power plant. Only the highest ranks knew the real purpose: war. Piece by piece, the Thunder-Soul came to life. Its armor was forged from alloys that could bend under pressure without breaking, materials tested in the crushing depths of the ocean and the blazing heat of re-entry. Its weapons were experiments that many scientists believed would never work. Plasma lances, railguns that could fire projectiles at unimaginable speeds, and energy beams so powerful they could slice through asteroids. Each system was risky, unproven, and terrifying. But humanity had reached the point where risk was no longer a choice. Inside the ship, the design was equally strange. It was not built for comfort, not like Earth space stations with their slow rotation and artificial gravity. Thunder-Soul was built for battle. Every corridor was armored. Every system had backups hidden behind more backups. Even the air supply was designed to recycle endlessly, so the crew could survive for months without resupply if needed. It was not a ship meant to explore the stars. It was a fortress meant to protect them. The crew chosen for Thunder-Soul were not ordinary soldiers. They were the best humanity had to offer. Pilots who had flown at the edge of the atmosphere, engineers who had spent their lives testing impossible machines, scientists who had broken the rules of physics just to see what lay beyond. Each of them had volunteered, fully aware that their mission might mean death. To serve aboard Thunder-Soul was not a posting. It was a vow. The world never knew how close it came to losing this secret. There were accidents during construction, explosions in hidden hangars, fires in deep laboratories, malfunctions that nearly killed the project before it began. But every time, the teams rebuilt, repaired, and improved. The setbacks only made them more determined. They knew that if humanity was ever to survive against an enemy from beyond, this ship would be their only hope. When news of the alien fleet reached Earth, Thunder-Soul was not yet complete. Engineers worked day and night, pushing themselves beyond exhaustion. Sleep became rare, food was eaten in silence, and the sound of welding, hammering, and machines filled the hidden hangars. Each worker understood that every hour counted. Every bolt tightened, every wire connected, might be the one thing that stood between survival and extinction. Finally, after years of secret work and desperate finishing touches, Thunder-Soul stood ready. She was enormous, far larger than anything humanity had ever dared to build. Her black hull gleamed under artificial lights, swallowing reflections like the surface of deep space itself. Lines of glowing vents pulsed with the rhythm of the energy core inside, giving the ship the appearance of something alive, something breathing. To those who first saw her completed form, she did not look like a machine. She looked like a predator. When the crew first walked aboard, silence filled the hangar. Every step echoed against the steel walls as they made their way through the ship's corridors. Each of them felt it, the strange vibration of the core, the storm waiting to be unleashed. Some described it as standing inside a heartbeat. Others whispered it felt like being inside the chest of a giant, listening to its soul. The commanders gave their speeches, short and powerful. They reminded the crew that Thunder-Soul was not just a ship. She was a symbol. She was the answer to the galaxy's arrogance, the proof that humanity would not be broken. Every member of the crew saluted not just their leaders, but the ship itself, as if she were alive and listening. And in a way, she was. The birth of Thunder-Soul was more than the completion of a battleship. It was the birth of hope. For the first time since the alien arrival, humanity felt a spark of confidence. They still faced impossible odds, but now they had a weapon of their own. A storm forged from human defiance, waiting in the shadows of Jupiter, ready to strike. The galaxy believed Earth was helpless. They had no idea that deep within the solar system, humanity had already birthed its answer. The day would come soon when the Thunder-Soul would reveal herself to the stars, and on that day, the galaxy would learn that crossing humans was pure madness. The alien fleet moved slowly, but their silence was more terrifying than any threat. Week after week, their dark shapes crept closer, passing Neptune, then Uranus, their enormous shadows blotting out the stars. They were so large that even the most advanced human telescopes struggled to capture their full size in a single frame. To the people of Earth, they seemed like floating cities of war, drifting with patience, as if time itself belonged to them. At first, humanity still hoped that words might prevent bloodshed. More signals were sent out, messages of peace, cooperation, and survival. In every language, in every frequency, Earth begged for dialogue. But the only response was the same mathematical code, repeated like a hammer striking again and again. Submit. Surrender. Serve. The silence that followed was worse. It was not the silence of misunderstanding, but of contempt. The aliens did not see humanity as worth speaking to. For them, Earth's voices were nothing more than noise from a primitive world. The first sign of hostility came quietly. Satellites orbiting Earth began to vanish. One by one, the eyes of humanity were plucked from the sky. At first, it looked like malfunctions, but soon the truth became clear. Invisible beams of energy had sliced through them, leaving nothing but drifting fragments. Communications grew weaker. Navigation became dangerous. Humanity was being blinded before the real battle even began. Then came the attacks on the colonies. Small research stations on Mars reported strange readings. Shadows moving across the horizon, signals jamming their equipment. Minutes later, their transmissions cut off completely. A mining outpost on one of Jupiter's moons went silent too. Rescue probes found nothing but wreckage. Burned domes, shattered life support systems, and scorched ground where alien weapons had struck. No survivors. Panic began to spread on Earth. People demanded answers, but governments struggled to admit the truth. Crowds filled city streets with protests, some begging for surrender, others demanding revenge. Fear turned into chaos. Shops were looted, borders filled with fleeing families, and whispers of the end of the world spread like wildfire. In the skies above Earth, human warships gathered in orbit. They were brave but fragile compared to the alien giants. Fleets of destroyers, carriers, and missile platforms floated together, forming the largest human armada ever assembled. Pilots strapped into their cockpits, faces pale but eyes determined. Soldiers loaded weapons on orbital stations, fully aware they might never return home. For the first time, humanity's survival rested not in leaders or politics, but in the hands of those ready to fight. The alien fleet finally crossed the orbit of Mars. Their sheer size made them look like a moving wall of metal. They did not fire immediately. Instead, they sent one final ultimatum, colder than the void itself. Surrender now or be erased. Earth answered with silence. Humanity had already made its choice. The first hostile strike came without warning. A beam of energy brighter than the sun lanced across space, tearing through a cluster of human defense satellites. In seconds, billions of dollars of equipment became molten wreckage. Another beam followed, slamming into an orbital station and ripping it apart like paper. The few astronauts inside never even had time to scream. The war had begun. Human ships scrambled to respond. Missiles launched, streaking like tiny sparks toward the alien wall. Dozens, then hundreds of projectiles flew, carrying nuclear warheads meant to shatter asteroids. They detonated brilliantly, filling space with fire. For a brief moment it looked like the alien fleet had been struck. But when the light cleared, the enemy ships remained unharmed. Their shields shimmered like ripples in water, untouched by the fury of nuclear fire. In return, the aliens unleashed their weapons. Blinding beams cut through the human fleet with cruel precision. Ships exploded into fragments, their crews lost in silence. Whole squadrons vanished in minutes. The aliens moved with terrifying calm, not as if they were fighting an enemy, but as if they were exterminating pests. On Earth, billions watched the battle unfold on screens, holding their breath as their defenders were torn apart. Despair began to rise. If this was the best humanity had, then extinction seemed certain. The aliens were not just stronger, they were untouchable. But deep in the shadow of Jupiter, hidden from alien sensors, a different ship waited. Larger than any human vessel, forged from secrets and sacrifice, it was the storm humanity had kept hidden until the last possible moment. The Thunder-Soul Battleship. Its core pulsed with a heartbeat of power, waiting to be unleashed. Its weapons, untested in real battle, glowed with potential. Inside, its crew stood ready, each of them knowing they carried the hopes of an entire species. They listened as reports of Earth's fleet crumbled. They felt the silence of friends and allies lost in flashes of light. And then, when the order finally came, their captain's voice cut through the tension with steady steel. It's time. Engines roared to life. The Thunder-Soul emerged from behind the gas giant, stepping into the battlefield like a predator entering a storm. For the first time, the aliens would face something they had not expected. Humanity was not done. Humanity had teeth. The first contact had turned hostile, and Earth was burning. But the real fight was only just beginning. The battlefield above the solar system was chaos. Human ships had scattered, their formations broken by the overwhelming firepower of the alien fleet. Flashes of explosions dotted the darkness, leaving trails of wreckage that drifted silently in orbit. For the people on Earth watching from their screens, it felt like they were witnessing the death of their species in real time. Every minute, another human vessel was lost, another hope turned into ashes. And then, in the middle of despair, something moved. From behind the enormous shadow of Jupiter, a new shape appeared. At first, it looked like a dark fragment of the planet itself breaking free. Slowly, steadily, it glided into open space, its massive hull gleaming with faint pulses of light. Unlike the fragile ships that had already fallen, this one radiated a strange, commanding presence. The crew inside could feel the hum of its energy core vibrating in their bones. The storm that had been caged was ready to be unleashed. The Thunder-Soul Battleship had entered the fight. The alien fleet noticed almost immediately. Their sensors locked on, scanning the ship, measuring its size and energy. To them, it must have seemed impossible. This vessel was far larger and more powerful than anything they believed humans capable of building. For a brief moment, hesitation flickered among the enemy ranks, but arrogance quickly drowned it. They saw Thunder-Soul as just another target to be erased. Inside the human battleship, the crew stood at their stations, eyes fixed on their captain. The ship's interior was alive with soft glows from the energy conduits, every panel thrumming with restrained power. No one spoke, they didn't need to. They all knew what was at stake. This first strike would decide whether humanity had any chance at survival, or whether they would be remembered as nothing more than dust beneath alien boots. The captain gave the order in a calm voice, steady as stone. Target the flagship. Every hand moved at once. Weapons primed, coordinates locked, and the storm inside Thunder-Soul began to roar. The energy core surged, filling the ship with a deep, rumbling vibration. It was as if the heart of a thunderstorm had been trapped within steel, now desperate to be freed. The aliens made the first move, firing beams of searing light toward the human ship. Thunder-Soul's shields flared, rippling like waves against the impact, but they held. The crew braced themselves, teeth clenched, but the hull remained unbroken. For the first time in the battle, a human ship had withstood the alien strike. Then came the answer. Thunder-Soul unleashed her first shot. A single beam of energy erupted from the ship's main cannon, brighter than lightning, faster than thought. It tore across the void and struck the alien flagship at its core. For an instant, silence seemed to swallow the battlefield. Then the alien vessel split apart in a violent explosion that lit up the darkness like a newborn sun. The enemy's command ship, the pride of their fleet, was gone in a single strike. Gasps filled control rooms across Earth. People watching screens in crowded cities burst into cheers. Soldiers who had been moments away from despair shouted in disbelief. For the first time since the war had begun, humanity had not only survived a blow, they had struck back. The aliens reeled in shock. Their ships scattered slightly, their formation breaking for the first time. They had underestimated their prey. The arrogance that had carried them across the galaxy cracked in an instant. Now, for the first time, they felt something they had never expected to feel from humanity. Fear. Inside Thunder-Soul, the crew barely allowed themselves a breath of relief. The captain's voice cut through the chaos once more. Reload. Target the next one. The storm had only just begun. Another surge of energy filled the core, brighter, hotter, alive with fury. The ship's hull glowed faintly as if it were on fire, but the systems held. Engineers shouted updates, gunners prepared the next shot, and navigators adjusted the ship's path through the wreckage of the fallen alien flagship. The Thunder-Soul was not a weapon of defense anymore. She was a predator, moving through the battlefield with deadly purpose. The aliens tried to respond. Smaller cruisers swarmed, firing their weapons in desperate bursts. Thunder-Soul's shields flared again and again, absorbing the storm. Some shots pierced close, rocking the ship, but the crew held firm. Their fear had been burned away by the sight of the flagship exploding. Now they carried only fire in their hearts. The second strike roared across the void, cutting through another enemy ship. This time it was a cruiser, smaller than the flagship but still immense by human standards. It too split open, debris scattering in every direction. A third shot followed soon after, and another alien vessel died. In the space of minutes, Thunder-Soul had done what the entire human fleet could not: break the enemy's wall. Across Earth, hope spread like wildfire. People filled the streets, shouting, crying, hugging strangers. Radios and televisions repeated the same message. Humanity had a chance. The aliens could bleed. The galaxy was not invincible. But inside the alien fleet, the mood was darker. Their commanders realized what they were facing was no ordinary human creation. This ship, this Thunder-Soul, was something new, something dangerous. They had come expecting conquest, but instead they had awoken a storm. As the battle raged on, Thunder-Soul's name began to spread, whispered first among soldiers, then across the world. It was not just a battleship. It was the symbol of humanity's defiance. It was proof that crossing humans was not just unwise, it was madness. The first strike had been made, and the universe would never forget it. The destruction of the alien flagship changed everything. Only moments earlier, humanity had been on the edge of extinction. Their fleets were burning, their stations falling silent, their defenses collapsing like sand against a storm. But in a single strike, the Thunder-Soul had torn through the pride of the enemy fleet. That flash of light had not just destroyed a ship, it had shattered the illusion that humans were weak. Across Earth, the reaction was immediate. Cities that had been filled with fear suddenly erupted with cheers. People who had prepared for death hugged each other and cried with relief. Soldiers, pilots, and engineers who had been close to despair now stood taller, fists clenched with pride. For the first time since the aliens arrived, humanity believed it might survive. But on the battlefield, the aliens did not cheer. They raged. The enemy fleet, once calm and precise, suddenly moved with fury. Their formation broke as ships swarmed toward the Thunder-Soul. Beams of light and energy erupted from every direction, filling the void with deadly fire. They wanted revenge for their fallen flagship. They wanted to crush the strange human ship that had dared to wound them. Inside Thunder-Soul, alarms blared as the ship rocked under the impact. Shields flared, glowing bright blue as they absorbed hit after hit. Engineers shouted updates as systems strained under the pressure. Panels sparked, corridors shook, and the crew gritted their teeth against the storm. They were outnumbered, surrounded, and targeted by the full wrath of an empire that had never known defeat. But the Thunder-Soul was built for this moment. The captain gave the order, and the great cannon roared again. Another beam of energy burst forward, slicing through an enemy cruiser. The ship split apart, exploding into fragments that scattered across space. Thunder-Soul twisted, engines burning bright, turning to line up another shot. Like a predator in the middle of a pack, she struck again, tearing through another vessel before the enemy could even react. Every successful strike sent ripples of panic through the alien fleet. For centuries, they had conquered without challenge. Every world they faced had bowed before them, broken quickly and completely. But now, a single human warship was not only resisting them, it was destroying them. Fear spread through their ranks, and in that fear was something deeper: doubt. On Earth, transmissions from the battle spread like wildfire. People huddled around screens in homes, bars, and crowded streets, watching in awe as Thunder-Soul fought. They saw her shields flare against the enemy's weapons, her cannons burn holes through ships far larger than her own. To the people of Earth, it was like watching a legend being born in real time. Yet the battle was far from easy. Thunder-Soul was powerful, but she was not invincible. Each alien strike weakened her shields, drained her energy core, and tested the limits of her design. Crew members rushed through the corridors, sealing breaches, repairing systems, and carrying wounded comrades back to safety. The ship's interior was alive with noise, alarms, shouting, and the constant thrum of the core that refused to die. Still, the crew did not falter. They fought with a determination born from desperation. Every person on that ship knew that Earth was watching. Every strike they made was not just for survival, but for the billions of humans who had no weapon of their own. Failure was not an option. The aliens, blinded by rage, pressed harder. Their weapons lit up the darkness, beams crossing in every direction. But their fury made them reckless. In their desperation to destroy Thunder-Soul, they collided with their own ships, fired without coordination, and left gaps in their formation. Humanity's storm ship exploited those gaps with precision. Each time the aliens closed in, another of their vessels was ripped apart by Thunder-Soul's guns. Soon the battlefield looked different. Where once the human fleet had been scattered wreckage, now alien debris filled the void. Wrecked hulks drifted lifelessly, glowing faintly as their cores burned out. The aliens were still more numerous, still stronger on paper, but the balance had shifted. For the first time, the invincible empire had bled. Word spread quickly through the galaxy. Signals from the battle raced across the stars, intercepted by distant civilizations. For countless worlds, it was the first time they had ever heard of humans. And the first story they learned was this: a small, defiant species had built a storm that could strike down giants. Inside Thunder-Soul, exhaustion weighed heavily on the crew. Sweat ran down their faces, their hands trembling from fatigue. But their eyes burned with fire. They were fighting not as individuals, but as one. Every order from the captain was obeyed instantly. Every risk was taken without hesitation. The ship felt alive, as though it shared the fury of the people inside it. The aliens finally hesitated. Their attack slowed, their formation pulled back slightly. It was not a retreat, not yet, but it was no longer the advance of conquerors. It was the retreat of predators who had tasted their own blood. The captain of Thunder-Soul stood silently for a moment, watching the enemy ships shift and scatter. He knew this was not the end. The aliens would regroup, and they would come again, stronger and angrier. But he also knew something else. A message had been sent, burned into the stars themselves. Humanity was no one's prey. The galaxy had expected a weak, frightened race. Instead, they had found a storm. And that storm had a name: Thunder-Soul. The shock of the aliens, the fury of their retaliation, and the stubborn defiance of humanity had transformed the battlefield into something greater than war. It had become a lesson the galaxy would not forget. Crossing humans was not simply dangerous. It was madness. The battle was not over, but something had changed forever. When the Thunder-Soul struck down ship after ship, humanity proved it would not bow to the empire that had crushed so many others. That single act of survival became more than a victory, it became defiance. And defiance burned brighter than any weapon. On Earth, people no longer hid in silence. The sound of fear had turned into the sound of voices, rising together as if the whole planet was shouting at the stars. Families in ruined cities looked up at the night sky and whispered prayers, not of despair, but of hope. Soldiers dug deeper into their trenches, gripping their weapons tighter. Pilots climbed back into damaged fighters, ready to fly again. Engineers who had been too tired to stand forced themselves up to work on broken machines. Humanity as a whole refused to fall. In the alien fleet, confusion spread like a sickness. Their commanders barked orders, demanding the destruction of the human ship, but doubt had already infected the ranks. Entire crews looked at their glowing screens and asked themselves the question no one had ever dared before. What if humans cannot be broken? Thunder-Soul stood at the center of this storm, scarred but unbroken. Her shields flickered, her hull burned, and her weapons smoked from overuse, but she remained. Every hit she had taken was proof that humanity could endure punishment. Every strike she launched was proof that humanity could strike back. The captain of Thunder-Soul knew the cost. He saw the fatigue in the eyes of his crew, the wounded carried away from their posts, the blood on the floor of the medbay. He knew they could not win by strength alone. But he also knew something greater. The human spirit was more dangerous than any fleet. The aliens had underestimated it, and now they were paying the price. A decision was made across Earth and its colonies. Resistance movements that had hidden for weeks finally came into the open. Secret bases powered up their old weapons. Civilians carried supplies to soldiers. Entire populations united with a single goal: fight. Humanity had been pushed to the edge, but instead of falling, it had found something it had not used in centuries: rage. Messages spread through secure channels. Voices carried across the stars. Do not surrender. Do not kneel. Humanity fights back. For the first time in generations, the human race spoke with one voice. They had lost cities, families, and friends, but they had not lost themselves. And when a people refuse to lose themselves, they become impossible to erase. On the battlefield, Thunder-Soul launched another strike. This time it was not just a weapon, it was a signal. The beam tore through the darkness, destroying another alien cruiser, and the image spread instantly to Earth. Children watching in underground shelters cheered and clapped. Old veterans of earlier wars saluted the screen with tears in their eyes. The strike was not simply metal and fire, it was a promise. Humanity will never surrender. The aliens pressed harder, trying to silence that promise. They poured their fleets into the attack, hoping to overwhelm the human storm ship by sheer numbers. But every time they advanced, they were forced back by fire. And every time one of their ships was destroyed, the defiance of humanity grew louder. Even those who had once doubted themselves began to believe. Scientists whispered of new strategies. Pilots boasted they would fly again. Even wounded soldiers begged to return to the fight. Humanity was discovering its true weapon, and it was not just the Thunder-Soul. It was the will of every human being alive. Alien leaders could not understand it. To them, war was calculation. Power crushed weakness. Victory belonged to numbers and technology. But here was a species that defied calculation. Here was a fleet that should have been ash and silence, yet was still fighting. Their logic told them humans should already be broken, yet they fought harder with every loss. To the alien commanders, it was madness. But to humanity, it was survival. Thunder-Soul's captain gave a new order. They would not run. They would hold their ground, no matter the cost. His voice carried through every deck of the ship, steady and calm, even as explosions rattled the hull. We fight for Earth. We fight for every human soul. Let them learn what defiance means. And his crew answered not with words, but with action. Fingers flew across consoles, weapons fired, and damaged systems were patched in seconds. The battle became a symbol greater than just one ship and one fleet. Across the galaxy, oppressed species watched the signals of the fight. Some laughed, some wept, and some dared to dream for the first time. If humans could defy the Empire, maybe they too could rise. The ripples of defiance spread outward, carried on the invisible currents of hope. But for humanity, the focus was simple: survive, resist, and fight back. Each blow the aliens struck only made their will harder. Each scream of rage from the Empire only reminded them that fear was no longer theirs. It belonged to their enemies now. The stars around Earth burned with war, and in that fire, humanity was reforged. They were no longer the frightened species waiting for mercy. They were the storm that refused to be tamed. Their defiance was not just survival. It was a declaration that no empire, no matter how vast, would ever rule their spirit. The Thunder-Soul's guns fired again, the light blazing across the battlefield. And with that light, humanity's defiance became eternal. The battle finally ended, but its echoes carried far beyond the stars above Earth. Wreckage drifted silently in space, glowing with dying fires, a reminder of the storm that had taken place. Among that wreckage, the Thunder-Soul still floated, battered and broken, but unyielding. Her hull was scarred, her engines weakened, and her weapons drained, yet she stood like a monument, a symbol of humanity's refusal to be erased. For the humans who survived, that day was never forgotten. People told stories of the ship as if it were alive, as if it had a soul forged from fire and courage. Children who had once hidden in basements now ran into the streets shouting, "We are Thunder-Soul." Soldiers painted her image on their armor. Engineers and scientists swore to build more ships like her, stronger and fiercer, to ensure that humanity would never again stand on the edge of extinction. But the legacy of the Thunder-Soul was not only in her guns or her victories. It was in the message she carried. Across the galaxy, other species who had lived in silence under the Empire's shadow saw the recordings of the battle. They watched a single human warship tear through fleets that should have been invincible. They listened to the voices of human survivors, declaring that they would never surrender. And for the first time in generations, those species felt something they had forgotten. Courage. Whispers spread in the dark corners of occupied worlds. Small acts of rebellion began. Supply lines sabotaged, hidden messages sent, weapons smuggled into resistance hands. The Empire, once feared as eternal, now seemed fragile. All it took was one spark, and the Thunder-Soul had been that spark. The alien rulers tried to twist the story. They called the humans reckless. They claimed Thunder-Soul's victory was nothing more than luck. They warned their subjects that resistance was foolish. But no amount of propaganda could erase the images of alien warships exploding under the Thunder-Soul's first strike. The truth had burned too brightly to be covered. For the humans, rebuilding became their new mission. Earth's cities were damaged, colonies scarred, families broken. Yet instead of despair, there was determination. Factories worked day and night. Old technology was dusted off and new designs were tested. People who had never thought of war before now trained to defend their world. Humanity had learned that survival was not enough. They needed strength. And strength meant unity. The Thunder-Soul herself was too damaged to fight again. She was brought back to Earth and set to rest in orbit, a permanent guardian above the homeworld. Pilots flying by would salute her. Children visiting space stations would press their faces to the glass, staring at the ship that had saved them all. She was not just a machine. She was a memory carved into steel, carrying the legacy of every life lost and every victory earned. The captain of the Thunder-Soul, though weary and scarred by battle, became a voice for humanity's future. He told the galaxy, "We do not seek war, but we will never kneel. Cross us again, and you will see what it means to awaken the storm." His words spread like fire, repeated across planets until even those who had never seen a human began to believe in their defiance. Other alien civilizations began to reach out in secret. Quiet signals were sent to Earth, messages of respect, offers of friendship, and even pleas for help. The humans had become more than survivors. They had become leaders, the first to stand against the Empire openly. And with every new alliance, the balance of power began to shift. The Empire, furious and shaken, prepared to strike again. But they hesitated. The memory of Thunder-Soul's first strike haunted them. They feared the madness of humanity, the kind of courage that turned weakness into strength. They knew that another war might not only fail, it might ignite a rebellion across the stars. For the human people, the Thunder-Soul became a legend passed down through generations. Parents told their children how one ship saved them all. Teachers spoke of the battle as the day humanity found its true self. Writers and artists painted her as a roaring dragon of steel, a storm given form. Songs were sung in her name, carrying across battlefields and into the hearts of those who needed hope. But the greatest legacy of the Thunder-Soul was not in her weapons, nor even in her victories. It was in the spirit she left behind. She taught humanity that their greatest strength was not technology or numbers, but the refusal to surrender. She showed that even when the enemy seemed unstoppable, defiance could turn the tide. And she proved to the galaxy that crossing humanity was not just a mistake. It was madness. As the years passed, new battleships were built, each one stronger than the last. Yet none were ever spoken of with the same reverence as the Thunder-Soul. She was the first to strike, the first to show humanity's wrath, the first to turn fear into fire. And though she no longer fought, she still protected Earth in her silence, a reminder that the storm would always return if humanity was threatened again. The galaxy never forgot her name. The Empire never erased its shame. And humanity, united under the shadow of that great ship, stepped boldly into the stars, ready for whatever came next. The Thunder-Soul had lit a fire that could never be put out. Her strike was the beginning of a legacy that would last forever. And so, The story of the Thunder-Soul did not end with the battle. It lived on in every act of courage, in every resistance that rose, in every species that dared to hope. She was not just a battleship. She was humanity's roar, carried into the void of space, telling the universe one eternal truth. Crossing humans was pure madness.